Have you ever wondered why your soul aches in silence, even when everything appears perfect on the surface? Why certain patterns keep repeating in your life, as if some unseen hand were drawing the same circle around you again and again? What if I told you this is not coincidence, but design? That the very fabric of your being is coated with truths you were never meant to forget, only to rediscover through fire, silence, and surrender. And among those sacred truths, there are 7 whispers from the divine, waiting for every woman brave enough to listen. But these are not the sweet lies you've been fed by culture, doctrine, or broken lovers. No, these are wild truths, untamed, dangerous, sacred. They do not comfort your illusions as they shatter them. They do not ask for obedience, they demand transformation. And once you hear them, you will never be able to unhear them. Because the truth does not politely knock on the door of your consciousness. It burns it down and walks in. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." What if God speaks not from the heavens, but from the depths of that very unconscious? What if these 7 messages are not commandments, but awakenings? Codes buried beneath shame, silence, and centuries of forgetting. Not rules to follow, but memories to reawaken. Not moralities to obey, but archetypes to embody. So the real question is not whether God is speaking to you, but whether you have been trained not to listen. Whether your instincts have been tamed, your intuition sedated, and your divinity dressed in fear. And yet, something stirs, doesn't it? Some echo within you that recognizes what's coming. Because truth, when it's real, doesn't sound like revelation. It sounds like remembering. This is not a video, it's a mirror, a labyrinth, a fire. And only those willing to step beyond the veil will understand what these 7 truths really mean. Watch until the end, not out of curiosity, but because part of you already knows. If you don't, something vital will remain lost. And the life you were meant to live, the one woven with blessing, not survival, will remain just out of reach. There are moments in a woman's life when the silence grows too loud to ignore, when her own reflection feels foreign, her desires start to ache instead of inspire, and her prayers begin to sound like questions whispered into a void. And yet in that void, something ancient watches, not with judgment, but with unbearable patience. Because what God wants you to know is not hidden in heaven, it is buried within you. And the reason you haven't seen it is because you were never taught to look beneath the surface of your own soul. You were trained to behave, not to awaken, to smile, not to feel, to serve, not to remember. You were told that blessings come from outside, that they wear the shape of romance, family, perfection, obedience. But the soul does not bless what is superficial. It blesses what is real, and real is messy, wounded, holy, and trembling. It is not the woman who hides her scars who is closest to God. It is the one who bleeds with dignity, in silence, who wrestles with the dark and still chooses light. There is a kind of woman who carries divinity, not in her smile, but in her refusal to be erased. And that woman is you before the world taught you to forget. There is a war happening inside you, one you did not choose, but were born into. The war between the woman you were told to become and the woman you secretly are. One wears the mask of safety, pleases, adapts, survives. The other is a storm disguised as skin. She questions everything. She remembers things no one told her. She cries in ways that language cannot hold, and she is the one God is trying to awaken. Not the performer, not the good girl, not the martyr, but the one beneath, raw, sacred, exiled. The you that once danced barefoot on dreams and now walks carefully around the ruins of her own longing. Do you feel it? That quiet ache behind your ribs, like a song that never got to play itself? That is not sadness, that is memory. The memory of who you were before you were named, before you were made small, before the fear of not being enough was planted in your body like a seed. What if the 7 things God wants you to know are not instructions, but activations? What if each truth is not a demand, but a mirror? What if you are not meant to follow a path, but to burn it down and grow a new one from your own ashes? This is not philosophy. This is not religion. This is resurrection. And it does not ask for your agreement. It demands your presence. Because the life you're living now, the one where your smile is tight, your days feel hollow, your voice trembles when it should roar, is not your life. It is your compromise. And compromise is not holy, alignment is. And alignment begins when you stop asking others for permission to be what God already whispered into your bones. But how do you hear that whisper? When the noise of the world has become your inner voice, you unlearn, you unbend, you unbury. You listen to the ache like it is gospel. You listen to the silence like it is prophecy. And you let go of every lie that taught you to fear your own knowing. Because God does not speak in thunder. He speaks in symbols. He speaks in cycles. He speaks in shadows. And that is why so many women never hear him. They expect clarity. But God was never clear. He was always deep. And to understand depth, you must drown a little. Let go of the surface. Let go of who they said you had to be. Let go of the shame you carry like a second skin. There is something inside you that already knows what I'm talking about. Not your logic, not your education. Something older. Something that existed before your name. A remembering. That is why you're still here, still listening. Because even if you don't know what you're looking for, part of you knows this is it. Not the final answer, but the beginning of the unraveling, the return, the rebellion, the blessing. And now that it has begun, you won't be able to stop it. Because the truth has a pulse, and it has found yours. And not every woman survives her own silence. Some become it. Some bury the ache so deeply inside their nervous system that even love feels like a threat. Some confuse numbness with peace. But God never wanted you to be quiet. He wanted you to be whole. And wholeness does not come through suppression. It comes through integration. Through the uncomfortable act of facing what you were taught to hide. Your desire, your power, your truth, your fire. These are not sins. These are signals. And the first thing God wants you to know is this: your pain is not punishment. It is a portal. That's the paradox most never grasp. We keep begging heaven for blessings while resisting the one thing that awakens them: truth. But truth is violent to illusions. It does not knock gently, it tears. And every tear is sacred. Every moment when the mask falls, every breakdown, every confrontation with the mirror, these are not failures, these are initiations. You were never meant to stay untouched. You were meant to be transformed. And the second thing God wants you to know is this: you are not broken. You are becoming. Carl Jung spoke often of the shadow, the parts of ourselves that we disown, exile, repress. But what if I told you your shadow is holy? That every instinct you've been taught to fear, your anger, your craving, your sorrow, your sensuality, is not a flaw but a compass. What if God does not dwell in the parts of you polish, but in the places you avoid? And what if the third truth is this: you will not be blessed by what you deny, you will only be blessed by what you reclaim, even the darkness, especially the darkness. Do you remember the first time you betrayed yourself to be loved? The first time you silenced your intuition to keep the peace? These memories don't fade, they fester. And over time they become symptoms: anxiety, fatigue, bitterness, a sense that you are living someone else's life. But God does not bless the version of you that pleases others. He blesses the one who returns, the one who chooses authenticity over approval. And that is the fourth thing he wants you to remember. Your voice is sacred. Your no is sacred. Your intuition is not negotiable. It is divine instruction. But you were raised to mistrust yourself, taught that obedience is safety, that surrender means self-erasure, that the feminine is only holy when it's passive, pure, controlled. These lies run deep. They live in your spine, in your decisions, in your relationships, and unless you question them, you will keep building your life on a foundation that was never yours. You will keep asking God for freedom while clinging to chains that feel like comfort. That is the fifth thing. Comfort is not the same as peace. One numbs your truth, the other resurrects it, and only one leads to blessing. Have you noticed the difference between a woman who performs peace and a woman who has made peace with herself? The first is exhausted, polished, quiet. The second is unpredictable, magnetic, rooted. The first is liked. The second is feared and respected. God is not calling you to be liked. He is calling you to be free. That is the sixth thing. And freedom requires loss of roles, of illusions, of identities that made you feel safe but stole your soul. You must be willing to disappoint others in order to stop disappointing yourself. You must risk being misunderstood to be truly seen. And here lies the seventh truth, the one no one tells you, because it cannot be taught, only lived. God is not outside of you. He is the part of you keep betraying, the stillness beneath your chaos, the clarity beneath your doubt, the feminine fire that refuses to die, even when you do everything to smother it. He is not waiting in temples, or books or sermons. He is waiting in your remembering. The moment you stop performing, stop running, stop asking for permission, that is when the blessing begins. Not because you earned it, but because you finally became it. There comes a moment in every woman's life, sometimes whispered, sometimes screamed, when the world she built begins to collapse. Not because she failed, but because it was never hers to begin with. The routines that once kept her safe now feel like cages. The roles she mastered begin to suffocate her. Even love starts to feel like obligation. And beneath all of it, a restlessness stirs, quiet, ancient, undeniable. It doesn't shout, but it never stops. It's not asking for more, it's asking for truth. This is not the end, it is the cracking open. And only those who have been hollowed out can ever become holy. But what do you do when everything you thought would fulfill you begins to feel like a lie? When your marriage, your motherhood, your career, your spirituality no longer reflect who you are, but who you had to become to be accepted. This dissonance is not a crisis, it is a calling. Because God does not bless masks, He blesses metamorphosis. And sometimes, to be reborn, you must first become unrecognizable. The shedding will hurt, the grief will be real. You will mourn the self you outgrew. But the self you are returning to, the one that remembers the sound of your own soul, she is worth it. Carl Jung said that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. That terror exists because the self you must accept is not just light, it is also shadow. And shadow is not evil. Shadow is everything that was once alive in you and got shamed into silence. The rage that was never allowed to roar. The pleasure that was never given permission to pulse. The dreams that died quietly because they did not fit into someone else's picture of you. But God does not want you to be palatable. He wants you to be powerful. He does not want your compliance, He wants your combustion. And still, there is fear, a sacred fear. Because to step into your own truth means losing the comfort of illusion. It means being misunderstood by those you love. It means walking into rooms and no longer knowing your place, because you are no longer willing to shrink to fit them. But here is the paradox you must carry like a torch. What feels like exile is actually exodus. What feels like rebellion is actually remembrance. And what looks like falling apart is actually you coming home. Not to a place, but to a presence. The one that has been waiting beneath every breakdown, every unanswered prayer, every betrayal dressed as blessing. And in that returning, something extraordinary begins. A woman who stops abandoning herself becomes magnetic. She no longer begs. For love, Irma, she becomes it. She no longer chases purpose, she breathes it. She no longer fears being alone, because finally she is not. She is with herself. Completely. And in that completeness, God speaks, not in thunder, not in miracles, but in moments. A glance that sees through the noise, a breath that no longer holds apology, a decision made from instinct, not from fear. And this is not the blessing you thought you needed. This is the blessing you were born to embody. But don't be fooled. This path will not make you popular. It will not make you predictable. It will not make you easy to love for those who only knew how to love your performance. You will lose people. You will outgrow rooms. You will no longer fit into stories written by someone else's fear. But you will fit perfectly into your own soul, and that is the greatest blessing of all, to no longer negotiate your truth in exchange for approval, to no longer abandon yourself for proximity, to no longer confuse survival with sanctity. You were not made to endure, you were made to remember, and remembrance is a rebellion the world may never understand. But your soul will, Every woman who chooses this path becomes a living symbol, not of perfection but of possibility. She becomes a mirror to others, still trapped in silence. She becomes a rupture in the lineage of women who were told to dim, to disappear, to die quietly. Her life becomes permission. Her choices become prophecy. And the world will feel it, not immediately, not always visibly, but in waves. In daughters who no longer inherit shame. In conversations that pierce denial. In relationships that stop demanding sacrifice and start practicing sacred reciprocity. This is what God meant by blessing. Not the absence of suffering, but the presence of soul. Not a life that looks good, a life that feels true. And if you are still here, still listening, it is not by chance. Something in you has always known. This moment would come, not as information, but as initiation. Not to teach you something new, but to awaken something ancient. You are not becoming someone else. You are unbecoming what never belonged to you. This is not a transformation. It is a return. And in that return, you will not find 7 things to memorize. You will find 7 mirrors, 7 flames, 7 truths that have been etched in your soul since the beginning. You are not here to learn them. You are here to live them. You may think you've heard enough, that you've gathered the message, absorbed the emotion, felt the weight of these words, but this is not about hearing. This is about remembering what your soul never forgot. Because the truth does not educate, it evokes. And the truths God wants you to know as a woman are not floating in the clouds. They are buried beneath the bones you have broken to become who you were expected to be. And now, one by one, those bones begin to tremble, not with weakness but with awakening. Do not expect this to feel like clarity. Truth rarely announces itself with comfort. It comes like a fever, burning away the falsities. It comes like a storm, erasing the paths you made to survive. And in that erasure, there will be moments when you feel lost, untethered, disoriented. But what is disorientation but the feeling of coming back to yourself after lifetimes of forgetting? What is fear but the gatekeeper that stands between you and your remembering? Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." The blessing is not out there. The blessing is what happens when you choose to descend into your own depths, your own wounds, your own sacred chaos, and rise from there. You will begin to notice how everything you once called too much, your emotions, your longings, your intuition was never too much at all. It was accurate. It was divine intelligence, but it terrified the world, because a woman who feels deeply cannot be controlled. A woman who listens to her inner voice cannot be manipulated. A woman who chooses truth over performance cannot be used, and the world does not know what to do with a woman like that, which is exactly why God is raising them, not to fight, not to convert, but to be. And in their being, they become temples of disruption and grace. This is not about perfection. This is not about becoming some holy version of femininity that checks all the boxes. This is about remembering that your existence as you are, in your truth, is sacred. That the 6th truth God wants you to feel, not think, but feel, is that your presence is enough to shift the atmosphere of an entire room. Your presence is not just decoration, it is invocation. When you stop apologizing for your essence, when you stop fragmenting yourself for comfort, when you stop asking for love in exchange for disappearance, that's when the blessing descends. Not because you earned it, but because you allowed it. And perhaps the final truth is the most haunting, that the life you've been praying for is afraid of who you are pretending to be. Your true life, the one where you walk in grace, depth, authority, beauty, cannot reach you if you keep hiding behind a version of yourself built on fear. Blessing cannot recognize masks. It only recognizes truth. You were not designed to fake your way into grace. You were designed to embody it. And embodiment takes courage. The kind of courage that shakes, the kind that leaves you raw, the kind that loses friends, breaks patterns, and says no even when your voice trembles. So what will you choose? To keep repeating the patterns of the women who came before you, silenced, sacrificed, praised for their self-erasure? Or will you become the rupture in that lineage, The woman who remembered, who returned, who rebelled gently, and stood in her blessing without explanation. The choice is not easy, but it is sacred, it is archetypal, it is the very crossroads Jung spoke of, the intersection where the conscious and the unconscious collide, where fate is no longer something you suffer, but something you shape. And as this moment lingers, as the echo of these truths ripple through the quiet places, in you, do not rush to make sense of them. Sense is the language of the mind. But this message, this blessing, and this remembering, it speaks to the soul. Let it land. Let it ruin what must be ruined. Let it bless what must be born. You were never meant to leave this journey the same, because this is not just a message, this is a mirror. And now that you've looked into it, truly looked, there is no turning back. And perhaps now, in this final stillness, you can feel it, not a conclusion, but a convergence. The symbols have spoken not in linear thought, but in spirals. What was fragmented has begun to gather, and what you thought would be information became initiation. This was never about 7 things to remember. It was about 7 thresholds, each one opened not with answers, but with echoes. Echoes that now live inside you, in the pause between breaths, in the tremble beneath your certainty, in the sudden stillness that now feels alive. This was not just a journey through words, it was a descent into yourself, into your myths, into the dark, sacred chambers where you left pieces of your truth scattered like forgotten offerings. And now you do not leave this space with more knowledge, you leave with less illusion, you leave stripped, softer, more whole. Because wholeness was never about adding more, it was about remembering what was never truly lost. And somewhere, within you, something ancient recognizes this as home. Think of the times you doubted your strength, and now feel how quiet that doubt has become. Think of the names you were given, good, pleasing, soft, saved, and how none of them fit the way your soul does when it rises unruly and radiant, unapologetically sacred. Jung spoke of the self as a living symbol, the union of all opposites. Now ask yourself, what would your life look like if you lived as that symbol? If instead of chasing blessings, you allowed yourself to embody them? Perhaps you already feel it, the subtle shift. Not dramatic, not visible to others just yet, but unmistakable to the parts of you that once hid. The girl who swallowed her voice, the woman who wore smiles like armor, the mother, the lover, the daughter, the wild one. They are not fragments, they are facets, and they are gathering. You are not one version of yourself, you are a constellation. And now you have remembered how to shine in the dark. So don't rush to interpret. Let this experience settle like incense in the air, curling slowly into the forgotten corners of your psyche. Let the questions live inside you longer than the urge to solve them. Let the truths dissolve like rain into the soil of your life. And when the world pulls you back into its noise, and as it always will, return to this. You are not here to be correct. You are here to be whole, not to please, to pulse, not to perform. To possess your soul in full. And if a single thread must remain, one symbolic phrase to carry in silence when language no longer fits, let it be this: God does not hide in heaven. He hides in the parts of you you were taught to fear. Let that be the anchor. Let that be the fracture. Let that be the fire. And now if something stirred in you, if a quiet recognition rose, if a memory not from your mind but from your soul began to pulse, then don't let this end in you. Pass it forward. This isn't a video to watch, it's a path to walk. Like all truths, it calls not for spectators but for witnesses. So take a breath. Feel your blood. Honor what moved. And if you are ready and not perfect, not certain, but ready, then join us. Like, share. Leave in the comments what part of you remembered, what part of you was reclaimed. And above all, subscribe to this space we call Archimind, not as a platform but as a sanctuary, a place where psychology meets soul, where myth meets woman, where truth meets the ones who dare to remember. Because you are not alone in this awakening, and this is just the beginning.